Hey everyone, I know many of you were not able to make it to our coffee hour with the State of the Parish address on Sunday morning, and so I'm re-recording it here for you all. I hope this helps. So, it's 2020, and this year is not messing around. I mentioned in my sermon on Sunday morning that I am feeling discouraged. And while there are a lot of reasons for many of us to feel discouraged right now, I'm going to share my specific reasons as they relate to our church community. December 2019, I hope you remember, was a wonderful month. Our annual pledge campaign went really well. Our staff was happy and working hard. We were looking at a year-end financial statement with a surplus. Worship numbers were slightly up. Dinner church attendance was strong. New programs were being planned. The pageant was fantastic. So many people came to the pageant and the feast afterwards that we actually ran out of room in the auditorium. And so I rolled into 2020 with eyes that were fresh and excited. Our first 3 years together were full of challenges in this community. We have weathered financial and staffing difficulties. We worked through the moving of the memorial tablets. We have tackled major deferred maintenance issues. And so 2020 looked like it might offer to our community the fruits of all that labor and some solid ground on which we could finally do the forward-thinking work as disciples of Jesus Christ. It seemed like we might actually have a minute to breathe. So you can see why I'm feeling discouraged. I'm not discouraged by our community. If there's one thing I've learned about Christ Church in the last 4 years, it's that we are a resilient people. I'm discouraged by the circumstances we find ourselves in that keep us apart and keep us from doing the thing that we love most, that is, being together. I'm discouraged because that's what I love the most too, being together with you, breaking bread and praying, singing, baptizing, celebrating, mourning. God is at work with us. Some days my frustration clouds my ability to see that work, but my faith then steps in and reminds me that God is very near. Finance. Our financial picture is surprisingly strong. We did apply for and receive a PPP loan to cover personnel expenses, and we are currently working on the loan forgiveness application. That PPP loan allowed us to, among other things, continue to pay our facilities assistants for full-time work, even though there was a limited amount of work for them to do. While the PPP has been a great blessing to us, the truth is, so far our giving has not taken as much of a hit as we expected due to the pandemic. This is largely because, as a community, we are faithful and we are generous, and our membership typically occupies a professional sector less impacted by this sort of financial crisis. Not exclusively, obviously. We're a community made of lots of different people. But typically this is the case. And I have seen how your gratitude for that stability then is translated into generosity for God's work here. Two main income lines, our tourist giving and our Ross rent income, have been notably negatively impacted. When Ross closed its doors for a few months, they asked for a few months of rent reprieve. We negotiated that reprieve into our contract renewal for the next 2 years, and I'm going to say more on that in a minute. Our tourist dollars are obviously nearly zero because there are no tourists. Though I'm grateful to our docents who have come up with a wonderful outdoor tour that they are offering for the weekends. That will help those tourist dollars, but in just a few short months left in 2020 and no interior access to the building, that line is not going to bounce back. Because the largest parts of our budget are typically spent on our staff expenses and on our facilities, neither one of which have decreased in 2020, we are going to see minimal COVID-related savings. We're on track to stay on budget through the end of the year without any layoffs, some of which our sister and brother churches have experienced. And that alone is an incredible gift to be able to say that. I'm grateful, grateful, grateful. Staff. I could spend the next hour telling you how remarkable the staff of Christ Church is. You probably already know that, but I could tell you for an hour at least. You see 4 or 5, 3 or 4 of us each week on Zoom or on Facebook or on Church Online. You do not see the other 10 or 12 of us that work behind the scenes to figure out how to get the information, how to keep the buildings clean and good repair, how to keep our financial systems running smoothly, and all of the other things that have become significantly more difficult to accomplish while we've been apart. In February, we brought Ann Richardson on board as our Director of Development, and she is worth her weight in gold. And she has brought wonderful creativity and professionalism to her role. She's a joy to work with. We said goodbye to Selden last month, which was hard. He infused our community with so much joy in such a short time. Lauren Killalay starts with us part-time on September 1 while she's finishing her last year at VTS. And I'll be meeting with her this week to help orient her and lay the groundwork for the practical and pastoral work she will be doing. Next month, we will say goodbye to Lyndon, which will be equally hard. We'll have some time to celebrate him in weeks to come. I hope before he leaves to hire an interim associate that will join us for a few months to fill in some programmatic and pastoral gaps. This will provide me some more time to do a nationwide search for another associate. We will soon be joined by Craig Dosher, our second-year seminarian from VTS. I'm meeting with Craig also this week to completely revise his expectations for whatever he thought he was going to do when he signed on with us last February. It's going to be a wild ride. You should definitely pray for him. I'm grateful to Rich Jones, who continues to help out when needed in pastoral care. He was especially helpful this month when we closed the church for a week to give the whole staff a much-needed break. I was so grateful to have Rich take our on-call calls and ensure that emergencies would be answered as needed. Thank you, Rich, for your help. Facilities. One way that this pandemic has served us well is in the restoration of our church. As happens in an old, active, much-used building, there was a buildup of these smaller, non-essential cosmetic projects that really did need to be done, but that would require the closing of the building for several weeks to accomplish. Hey, there we go. So we closed the building, and we did those projects. In addition to the repair and reinforcement of the balcony in preparation for the new organ, we were also able to repaint the whole church, add a new sound and video system, and that's the video feed that you see in our Sunday recordings now, to refinish the floors and the chancel and the balcony. This was all accomplished with money from our annual distribution from the foundation, earmarked for just this purpose, and for which we are so grateful. I'll put in a plug for the foundation. As you are doing any end-of-life planning, I hope that you will remember the foundation in your will. You may remember that at the beginning of the year, another contract negotiation with a development partner for Fowler House ended. The plan was to stop looking for a new partner and then step back and revision what we might really want to do with that building. Our Fowler House committee diligently negotiated for another lease. Our Fowler House committee diligently renegotiated for another lease extension with Ross, and though it is at a smaller annual rate, we're very pleased to say that we do have 2 more years. And we have those 2 more years to figure out what we are doing. And to be honest, I have no idea how we are going to have this significant community conversation without being together in person. How will we figure out the future of this building when we are still so far apart? But it's on my list. It's on my list to figure this out. And I know the clock is ticking. Stay tuned. Worship. Our worship life since March has gone through several iterations. For the first couple of months, like everything else, we were just hanging on for dear life. When Selden, Lyndon, and I admitted to each other that we were all literally having nightmares on Saturday nights about Zoom failure or Facebook shutdowns, we shifted to a more permanent solution of pre-recorded worship. This allows us the flexibility and the gift of a higher production value. And that is to say, it's better and easier to watch. Still a lot of work to produce, but it's a lot better product. The Church Online platform, while not perfect, as we learned this past Sunday morning, is a good host for those pre-recorded videos and allows us some of that community feeling of being together as we are in the chat room. For the last couple of months, we've seen something like 120 to 170 screens, views of people in attendance for the duration of the service. Remembering that several of those screens have 2 to 4 people in them, the number of humans, individual people joining us for worship is actually much higher than 120 to 170, and that is a good and hopeful number. Those who prefer a more live worship online can join us on Facebook any morning of the week at 7:30 a.m. Clergy and laity take turns leading daily morning prayer. And in the evening, thanks to Lauren's organization, we are also offering weekly Compline on Wednesday evenings at 9. Our first dip into worship on our property has been evening prayer on Monday nights. While this was initially created to see how it might go to have people back together, it's become a nice antidote to all the screens. There are some challenges. The cicadas are really loud. It is hot, and we have to stand so far apart, sometimes it's hard to hear one another. But the challenges are surmountable, and we're solving problems left and right, and it's giving me hope for a Sunday morning outdoor experience, perhaps as soon, I hope, as mid-September. There are 1,000 hurdles to leap in order to make that happen, but leaping is what we do, and we've got good people working on it. Regardless of how we will begin in-person worship, online worship will be a fixture in our community. There will always be an option to join us online. The format may shift as our situation continues to unfold, but we will always continue to offer online worship. We still do not have permission from the diocese to enter our buildings as a worshiping body, and that is smart. It's a good decision by the diocese, and I'm happy they've given us that leadership. We don't even have permission to have the staff back in our offices regularly at work. It's going to be a while. We don't know how long, but it's going to be a while. We also, my friends, do not have permission to share Eucharist together. And, like singing together, Eucharist will likely be fairly late to come back. The nature of the common cup and the passing of bread is such that until we have safeguards against the virus, these things will be dangerous. I have made it clear that I am, like many of my clergy colleagues around the church, theologically averse to Eucharist celebrated without sharing. I know there is a provision for spiritual communion or anti-communion where we consecrate the elements but do not hand them out. I find this a problematic practice. I myself find it a problematic practice for many reasons. But I'm seeking conversations with colleagues that do have a solid theological grounding for it in order to see if I can figure out how to wrap my head around offering it occasionally for those for whom it would be uplifting. I hope to offer a forum in late September about Eucharistic theology, and I hope to get my head clear before that. Anti-racism. I don't have a lot to share about this right now. I will say we're starting the Sacred Ground small group program in late September. You all, it is such a good program. It is thoughtful and it is powerful. I believe that everyone who follows this small group work will find themselves challenged in some way. If you haven't yet signed up, it is a commitment of time, but I can assure you that if you find the time, it will be time well spent. Depending on how that first round of small groups goes, we will offer a second round, maybe beginning in the winter. After we've completed the Sacred Ground work, we will have more people in the parish prepared to lead us all through some more difficult work ahead, examining our own history, the grace in it and the joy in it, and also the places where we fell powerfully short of being the good people we were created to be. There are 100 places we could go from there, and I look forward to being on that journey with you. Here are some notes on the pandemic and how it's been going for us at the church. First, practically speaking, you are going to see a slower pace of church life over the next few months compared to the autumns of the past. There are many, many reasons for this, and they're all based in things we've learned over the last 5 months. First, while there are many things we can do online in Zoom and Facebook and on our websites, we can't do everything online. So practically speaking, there's less we can offer. Second, most of what we can do online requires more behind-the-scenes work and preparation than things in person, and that takes time. And because we are staying isolated, it's sometimes difficult to figure out how volunteers can help in that behind-the-scenes work. Remember, the majority of your Christchurch staff were trained in face-to-face person work, and that's the work we love. So over the last 5 months, which seems like a very long time, but it's not necessarily long enough to have fully shifted a career from one direction to another. So we're working on it, but it still takes time for us to wrap our head around these changes. Third, we are reinventing everything right now. Everything. And it's really complex. All of our staff, just like our community members who teach in schools, have been retraining to learn how to do work that is fundamentally incarnate. That is work we do together, face to face. And we're retraining to learn how to do that work virtually. There is a programmatic cost to that transition, but there's also an emotional one as well. And your staff members, from the clergy to our program leaders to our facility staff, we have all been feeling the pain of shelving good work that we have built and nurtured and look forward to year after year. We're also engaging our creative juices to see how we can build new programs and do new things and look at some of our time-honored traditions in new ways. But the emotional toll cannot be underestimated, and so we're needing to take the time that we need to grieve even as we're doing that creative work. We appreciate the grace that you've extended to all of us. We have some challenges that have been presented by the pandemic, things that we still haven't solved, some of which may not need to be solved, and some of which may never be solved. First, we have not yet figured out how to engage the small handful of parishioners that, either by choice or by circumstance, do not have access to internet or devices that can be communicated on electronically. We have sent out occasional paper mailings to help keep these community members posted, but with the limited number of people in the office, even paper mailings are not always easy. And most of the news we have to offer in a paper mailing is about things that are happening in the online community. It's tricky. We've been relying heavily on our pastoral care committee to maintain contact, and we've been following up with clergy calls when necessary. But this time is so heavily digital by safety and by necessity that I do sometimes worry that we are failing some of our beloved members. The second challenge is our, as a side note, I'm going to say this differently than I said this on Sunday morning because I realized someone corrected me. We have not yet figured out how to engage our youth in online programming that excites them and gets them engaged with each other. This was true before Selden left, and his departure hasn't really helped as it's left a hole. Our youth members are active with friends, and some of them are active in some of the other things that we're doing in church, including worship and some of our outreach programs, but we haven't found a way to get youth engaged with youth. And it's hard to figure out how to entice them in that. Third, so many of us are on our screens all day long for our work or for our social time or for the many tasks that we have to do just to keep life going. And so visiting church on a screen or going to a church meeting or a social event or a Bible study on Zoom is not all that appealing. This is, of course, a matter of personal choice. But I'm aware that we have members who are otherwise faithful Christ Church attendees that just cannot bring themselves to look at a computer one more time in the week. And my heart goes out to you. And we miss those members, but we also understand that this is where we live. And I know they understand that as well. And finally, volunteers. So many of you have reached out and offered help. And the staff are just not sure how to engage volunteers right now as much as we need it. The majority of the help that we can use is actually very technical, and it's sustained and requires a commitment that some volunteers are often not able to make during the day, every day, once a week, every week. It's difficult to figure out how to make that happen. I haven't yet figured out how to engage our volunteers who are engaged in incarnate ministry, like our hospitality gurus, our coffee hour mavens, our welcome team, our chancel chapter organizations and committees like that. We're thinking about it. We're working on it. And again, as we continue to unfold, please know we are keeping your offers of help in our hearts and pulling and drawing from you when we can. This is, for sure, the longest State of the Parish address I have given in 4 years. And it's the one with the most open-ended questions. Our future is not uncertain. We will be here, on this block, in Old Town, for generations to come, in some form or fashion. But how we will live into that future is more in flux than it has ever been. This is a hard time, to be sure. But it is not the hardship of it that is so confounding to me. It is the uncertainty. I know you're frustrated. I'm frustrated by so many unanswered questions about worship, about Eucharist, about staffing, about ministries that are sitting on the shelf waiting for attention. I have been thanking you for your patience so long that I need a new word for it. Forbearance, tolerance, kindness, sense of humor, fortitude. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for all of it. It means a lot to me and to the staff that are working so hard to keep this puzzle together. We are in this together, all of us. And as always, we have Jesus at the helm, leading us through. Thank you.